In this gospel lesson, a Pharisee comes to Jesus to test him, but it's a question that appears several times in the Gospels. It is, which is the greatest command? And the response from Jesus, sometimes the response comes from others, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. And those two commandments are bound together in being the great commandment. And so then the Pharisee here is satisfied with Jesus' response, but there's a pause before things go forward, and the pause is a pregnant pause. So what are you going to do about it? So if it's love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself, what are you going to do about it? So how do you put that into action? How does that change anything that you do? And that's a bigger question, isn't it? Because anybody can say anything, and it doesn't necessarily have any kind of correspondence to reality out there. We can say anything. You've heard the story maybe about the guy who died and went to the pearly gates, and St. Peter was there. And St. Peter said to him, "Oh, we've just had a change in policy. And so we've decided that in the interest of free will, we're going to go ahead and allow you to sample hell and heaven. So you've got 24 hours, and you go down to hell, and you can sample it, see what it's like, and then you'll have another 24 hours in heaven, and decide, and then you can decide which one you want to stay with." And so he says, "Well, that's unusual, but okay, that's a great idea." So they put him in an elevator, and he went down to hell. And the doors of the elevator opened, and it was spacious, and it was like a country club. I mean, all of the amenities. There was the greatest golf course he'd ever seen. There was a spa. There were tennis courts, the biggest pool. It was incredible. And he knew a lot of people who were there having fun. And he says, "Well, this is pretty great." And so before he knew it, 24 hours was done. And so St. Peter said, "Okay, so your sample is finished, and so now it's your opportunity to go to heaven." So he gets in the elevator, and he goes up to heaven, and the doors open, and there are all of these kind of cushy clouds, and there are all of these angels that are playing on harps, and you can kind of bounce on the clouds, and he said it was really kind of fascinating to him, and he ended up kind of the 24 hours went past, and so then he had to come back to St. Peter, and so St. Peter said, "So all right, so you've sampled both, so what's your choice?" And he said, "Well, I mean, heaven was nice, I liked it, but I felt very at home in hell. Surprisingly, I mean, a lot of friends, it was great, it was really wonderful. So I guess surprisingly, I guess I would choose hell." And St. Peter says, "There you go. Okay. So you get back in the elevator, and you can go down and begin eternity." So he gets in the elevator. He goes down to hell. The door opens, and he walks out, and it looks like a volcano just erupted. I mean, it is hot, and there is flame and lava and people in torment and all of these things. It's just awful. And St. Peter's standing there, and he says to St. Peter, he says, "Well, I don't understand this. This is nothing like what it was like when I was here before." And St. Peter says, "Well," he said, "that was the campaign, but now you've voted." So what we say doesn't necessarily have any correspondence to what happens, right? And so now Jesus is having this conversation with the Pharisees, and he says, the greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. But how does that happen? Where does it happen? And so for us, the question of where do we see that happen in our lives? How do we make tangible, make real, effective, lasting changes in the way that we handle our relationships with one another? As we've been going through the God-Saturated Life series, the theme for this coming week has to do with our relationships. God transforming in our relationships. And so in our relationships is the opportunity for us to be able to experience this kind of transformational love. And I'd like to focus on one particular kind of relationship, and that is the relationship of friendship. The relationship of friendship. Because it is in friendship that we experience the influence of other people that can have an effect on us. And I will say that not all friendships are equal. I mean, we got lots of friends. I mean, there are lots of friends that are out there. They can be golfing buddies, or they can be, people that we go to the bar with, or they can be people that we play tennis with, or are part of the same club, or all different kinds of things. But I want to say that this is a particular kind of friendship, and I'm just going to call these folks spiritual friends. Spiritual friends. People who are there for you in terms of your relationship with God. And let me just make the argument for you that these people are critical for you in your spiritual progress. You need folks who are going to be intentional in having a relationship based on God with you and able to speak into your life. In the Old Testament lesson, we see a great example in Moses' relationship with Joshua. Joshua is one of these guys who has been there with Moses from the beginning. So Joshua was there when Moses came and led the children of Israel out of Egypt into this their experience of what it means to be the people of God. So outside of all of the bondage that was there, Joshua saw it, and he saw Moses sweating bullets over what God was going to do. And Joshua was there to support Moses. He was there at the crossing of the Red Sea when the Egyptian army was bearing down on them, and then suddenly the Red Sea parted, and the children of Israel went through on dry land, and it engulfed the Egyptian army. Joshua saw that. He was there when they almost got into the promised land, and then because of fear, the children of Israel balked, and they ended up spending the next 40 years wandering in the desert, and Joshua was there by the side of Moses. Joshua was there when enemies would come and attack them, and he was aggressive in being able to fight back and defend the people of Israel. And he was there when finally the end came, and Moses surrendered his life into the hands of his faithful friend, Joshua. Joshua had seen it all. Joshua had been there when Moses climbed the mountain and met with God. He was there waiting for him. He was there at the heights of the mountain. And he was there in the deserts and had the grit of the sand in his teeth. And he saw Moses successful and failure. And he believed in him. And he stayed at his side. And he was faithful. You need a Joshua. You need a Joshua who is going to be able to commit him or herself to you, who is going to be standing by your side, who believes in you more deeply than you do yourself, who knows you better than you do, and who is praying for you, standing with you and is there to receive you when you're weak and can't go on any farther. You and each one of us needs a Joshua. These kinds of spiritual relationships don't just happen. Jesus, in his relationships with the disciples, he didn't just kind of wait until they bumbled into each other. He chose them. He was intentional about these relationships. And so let me just give you several characteristics of how to make these kinds of spiritual relationships happen. And the first piece is that they are intentional. That is, as Jesus did, he scoped out the people that he knew, and he reached out and he chose them. Spiritual friends don't just happen. They come because we seek them out. They come because we're looking for a particular kind of influence in our lives. And we think that there's someone who can provide that kind of an influence for us. And so we're willing to take the risk of stepping out of our comfort zone, of stepping out of this kind of the normal flow of all of the relationships that are there, and making a choice and putting ourselves out, knowing that they may say, no, I don't have enough time, or I have all other kinds of things that are doing. It's hard sometimes to be turned down in that way, but to be able to look for those folks who have a spiritual depth about them, who have qualities and characteristics that you admire, and that you know, if you teamed up, you could do great things. It takes more than a little bit of humility to be intentional and to look at the people who are around us and to say, I'm looking for a buddy, somebody who can be with me. And then the second piece to be intentional is also that this relationship is a relationship that is based on a relationship with God. As I said earlier, we got all kinds of friends, people who you have in common, that you like golf, or that you like bridge, or you like to be you're part of the same other kind of club. And so not unlike any of those other things, and those things are all good, but this has to do with buddying up with somebody who is concerned and wanting to grow in terms of their relationship with God. So they're learning, they don't have it all figured out. They're wanting to be able to explore more about this. You know that not all of your friends have that kind of an effect on you. I know there are people for me who when I spend time around them, it's like I feel like I'm having to prove myself, or I'm having to brag in some way, or I hide myself from them. That's not what this is about. This is about a relationship that's built on our relationship with God, and trying to step more deeply into our understanding of who He is, and finding someone who's willing to walk that journey with us. And then thirdly, it's all about the fruit. It's all about the fruit. So as we try to grow in our relationship with God, with one another, we want to be able to do those things that allows us to experience more success in providing the fruit of what a godly life looks like. If Jesus was consumed with fruit when he went and he saw a fig tree that didn't have fruit growing on it, remember what he did? He cursed it. And the whole thing kind of died and withered because it didn't have fruit. He talked about the vine and the branches, and that if there was a vine that was not producing any fruit, you'd just kind of yank it out and you go and you burn it. Or if there's a vine that part of it's bearing fruit, but part of it isn't, you chop off the parts that aren't so that you can have more fruit. And so it has to do with, these relationships have to do with being able to be fruitful, to be fruity people. To be able to experience this growth that happens in what it means to be not religious, but human. God created us to be human and to flourish as human beings. And so when St. Paul talks about what is the fruit of the Spirit, he talks about things like love and joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control. All of those things are not necessarily religious things. They're things that allow us to be successful and growing as human beings, to be filled with joy, to be optimistic, not to be just kind of curmudgeonly, kind of, every day's gray and there's nothing that's happening and nothing's going anyplace and there's no purpose for meaning for life and I don't know what it is that I'm doing. Well, let me tell you, as a person who's centered on God's kingdom and the things that Jesus has called us to do, when you wake up in the morning, you got a job description, right? You don't have to wonder if there's something important that you're to be about that day. There are life-changing things for you to be about that day. And they are the kinds of things that bring us joy, bring us the opportunity to be able to grow and develop and to see all kinds of wonderful things happen in the lives of the people that we care about. And so to be with those people who produce that kind of fruit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, faithfulness, goodness, self-control. Relationships that allow us to be the kinds of people that aspire for deeper, more solid relationships in our lives and the people that we care about. When I was in Philadelphia, out of a need to see some of those things happen more effectively in my life, I reached out to 3 other guys. And all 3 people that I respected in terms of their spiritual lives and what it was that they were about. And so I reached out to them, and each one of them agreed that we would meet. So we met every week for lunch, and we'd bring a bag lunch so we didn't have to go out to a restaurant someplace. And we found a little classroom in the corner of our church, and for the first probably 10 minutes, we just kind of chit-chat about, whatever. But then as we got into the meat of why it was that we were meeting, we would talk really about 2 things. We'd go around in the circle. The first thing was, what's been happening in your life this past week? And so the expectation was that there was a level of trust in this circle. And so we could trust those folks. So you could talk about anything that had gone on, whether you'd had a fight with your wife or whether there was a disappointment in your job or you'd had some kind of a physical diagnosis. You could be honest about what was going on in your life, and you didn't have to worry about reputation or feeling the need to somehow brag or hide. What was happening in your life? And then the second question is, how can we pray for you for this coming week? And so that meant that we would take those prayer requests and we would keep them with us for that person that entire week. And so if they needed to say something to their spouse, or if they had to do something with a child, or they had to do something at work, we would be praying for them through the week. And so then every once in a while we get an email or a phone call, or if I saw them, they'd give me that kind of look, and you knew that they were praying for you, that they had your back, that they were standing there by your side. And then when you got back the following week, it was kind of like, all right, so we've been praying for you, so what's been happening in these areas? And so then you can talk about what's been happening, the places that you've been successful and the places that you haven't been. And you just kind of go around and around. Over the period of years, while we did that, one of us lost his son to a drug overdose. Another one went through a divorce. Another one went through a painful job transition. And I struggled with depression. Those guys were the folks that continued to support me and others as we kind of walk through these challenges of life. We take friends for granted. And probably it's because we oftentimes don't have very high expectations of them. We don't think through the potential of this tremendous gift that God has given to us in the gift of friendship, and how we can support one another and care for one another and allow and help facilitate growth in one another. We need a Joshua. We need a band of disciples of which we are one. We need a community of people who stand firm through the battles and through the celebrations to help us claim the things that are awesome and wonderful that are happening in our lives, and not just kind of let them pass by because everybody's too busy. Book of Proverbs says, as iron sharpens iron, so does one friend sharpen another. Sometimes we can feel a little dull. Maybe it's the influence of a really good friend who can help to sharpen us up and live into our potential. Amen.